All right, so thanks for joining today. Here we've got today's agenda. What we'll go through is we'll go through the workflows. This is really the KPMIC Basics. It's something we like to do before jumping into the application with anyone who is new. And then we'll go through really a deep dive on quotes. I've got a bunch of things listed out here below, and we'll make sure to hit on each one of these things. And as we go through both the workflows and the quotes, please feel free to interrupt if you have any questions, and then we should have some time at the end as well for any questions not regarding these topics. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and flip over to this PowerPoint and we will go through these workflows. And if you want a copy of these, I am more than happy to send that to you after as well. So first things first is these top right buttons. These are found on any page of KPMIC. So starting from the left to the right, we've got the question mark icon. It says bell here. It used to be a bell, but it is now a question mark, and that has all the documentation of the application. This is really a good first stop. If you have any questions about how to use a module or just have a general question really about how something works, the best feature about it is at the top there is a section to search in. So if you were to search the word quote, you would find all the different sections of the documentation that have the word quote in them, so it can narrow it down for what you're looking for. The next is the waffle or the building icon. One of our partners pointed out that this building looks suspiciously like a waffle, and the name kind of stuck from there. So this is where all of the information that will apply across all projects or opportunity is stored. So it is going to have all of your master templates for your company, i.e. it's going to have your company address that will appear on all of your documents. If you have warehouse addresses that you want to pull through to your various different projects, it'll have that. Your standard quote verbiage, and we'll take a brief look at that towards the end. And all of the other things that are really going to be across everything. One new thing in there is also your schedule templates. The next here is the avatar icon. That is going to have all of your personal information. That's where you can manage all of your email preferences. You can also change any of your personal information, like your name. If you need to reset your password, all of that is done under there. And then, of course, the last one is the log off button. Next here, just a little bit about navigating around the application. I'm sure some of you on the call really this is going to be not news to you, but over on the left is going to be all of our overview tabs. So the way I like to differentiate these is any of these is going to show you, like for your deficiencies, it's going to show you all of your deficiencies regardless of what project it's under. But for your projects, you'd have to go into your project and then find the deficiencies just for that project. But this projects tab here on the left is, again, just going to show you all projects, and then you can drill down from there. One tab that I do want to point out here that's a little bit special is the forum tab. It's the one place that all partners using the application will have access to. So you can post something out there, and all DIRTT users and all partners will be able to see it and to respond to you. And again, just for navigation, if you're sitting here as someone who is new to KPMIC, if you can't find it here on the left, your best bet is to go into an individual project or into an individual opportunity. So certain things like your RFQs, you would go into your opportunity to look at your RFQs for that opportunity or for your project. So the next thing is we wanted to cover a little bit about just how information flows through the application. So at the beginning, you've got your lead identified, and you can create an opportunity. So this is like your client, and then you can create multiple opportunities under a given client. Your opportunity is one, and then you convert it over into a project. And this, once it becomes a project, that's when you really get your full suite of project management tools. This one is just about a little bit of terminology within the application. One thing that we do differentiate is between clients and leads. So clients have some one work under it, So it's got at least one or more projects under it. Leads will just have 0 projects. So when you're under that CRM tab, that's how those tab names are differentiated and what information is stored under them. And then for our graph here, so our clients and leads, we got our won work, we have projects, we have potential work, and just have our opportunities under it. For our quotes and our forecast, so you create your quote, and then you can itemize your quote with different line items, and those line items can be marked as DIRTT products. And when you designate your quote as the forecast, this is really the signal to the application to make sure that all the information flows through to everywhere else. So as an example, on the Opportunity Overview tab, you have to designate your forecast, your quote as your forecast for it to flow back to that tab so that you can view all of the SFN numbers for each opportunity. Because if you have multiple quotes under an opportunity, the system needs to know which one is going to be the quote to go by. Then a little bit more about quotes here. So quotes also have an install estimate section where you can build out the hours for all of your different install activities. And then the Designate as forecast, the project version of that is Designate as final, and it serves a similar function to the Designate as forecast area. One handy thing about the application is you can also submit status reports with hours for the same set of installation activities, and then the application will put together reporting automatically that you can view. So if you're looking at, how many hours do we estimate for receiving versus how many actually came in, you'll be able to see how you're tracking towards that if you are like somewhere in the middle of the process, or once you're done, you can see, all right, where do we underburn on, where do we overburn on? Do we need to be a little bit more conservative about some estimates, or do we need to, are we always ending up with extra hours for a certain activity? The next thing here is you can also produce purchase orders out of Kinetic. And when you're building your quote, basically all of the information that you need to build a purchase order is already being captured. So you've got the cost of it, you've got the company associated to it. So we've got a function here that you can just push over your quote line items to a purchase order automatically. And the same thing is true from a deficiency. If you need a purchase order for that, you can push your deficiency line items to a purchase order. Of course, you can always just create a purchase order as a one-off, and it does not have to be based on your quote or deficiency. The next thing here is we've got RFIs and PCIs. So RFIs are requests for information, and PCIs are potential cost impacts. So a request for information may go to your architect to get some sort of clarification on something. Like an example I might use is, we don't know whether a door was intended to be locking or non-locking. So if it is supposed to be locking and you've got to buy a different piece of hardware for it, it might end up having a cost impact or a time impact. So you've got the ability here to convert an RFI into a potential cost impact. And from there, your potential cost impact is convertible into something else. And this is really intended to be a management tool so that you can really track all this stuff so that anyone on your team can come into the project and they can view what's going on your project, and it makes your handoffs a little bit easier. So from your PCI, you can turn that into a change order if it's going to be something that the client's paying for. If it is something that needs to be converted into a deficiency, you can convert your PCI from there. Or if it is going to be a margin hit, the PCI can be converted into a billable. So a billable in the context of Kinetic is going to be a margin hit. So there's two types of billables. There's one where it's going to be the partner who covers the cost of it. And then there's also a subcontractor liable version of the billable, where it would be something that one of your subcontractors would cover the cost of. So next here, we've got our project contacts. So this project team is really important because it is how you manage access to any of your vendors or install users. If you've granted them access to Kinetic, they will only have access to the projects that they have been added to. So the other big important reason for the project team, or that we mentioned the project team here, is because if you're trying to assign out a task or trying to add someone on copy to an email that you're sending out of Kinetic, or just assigning something else to them, they need to be on the project team. So throughout the application, you'll find these manage project team buttons to easily update your project team to make sure that you can assign the correct people to them. And so on your project team, of course, you can have your vendors, as I had mentioned. Your partner employees will be on there by default. If you have someone new join, you'll probably have to add them to the ongoing projects. And then for new projects, they'll be automatically added. And then you can also add your DIRTT counterparts here as well. And of course, that's important if you want to copy them on your, excuse me, when you submit your order or on a deficiency or just something else that they need to be on the loop, in the loop on. The last slide here before we jump into the application and take a look at quotes is just where to manage your different lists of people within the application. So vendor employees and client contacts are two separately managed lists. So for your vendor employees, you'd go over to the vendors tab. That's one of the tabs on the overview. Then you'd go into an individual vendor, and then you'd be able to manage your vendor employees from there. So if you need to add someone who you're going to send an RFQ to, that is the way you would do it. And then for client contacts, there's two ways to do it. You can either go into the CRM tab. Again, that's one of those tabs on the left from the overview. So your CRM tab or your contacts tab. When you're going into the CRM tab, you would then go into a client or a lead, and then you would see the client employees there, and you can add as many as you need to from there. This will let you track your sales activities and all of those other things. The contacts tab, you'll just see a list of all of your clients or leads across any one of the companies that you have in the system, and then you can assign a client or lead after you create a new one. So I tried to go through those workflows pretty quickly. That was our last slide here. But before I jump over to quotes, I guess, were there any questions on the phone here? Okay, cool. So for the quotes here, what we'll first take a look at is just kind of creating some new quotes. So duplicating, importing, and designating as the forecast. And I'll try to go through these. It might not be in this exact order, but we'll make sure to hit on every one of these items. And again, just interrupt me if you have any questions to clarify or if you want to go a little bit deeper on an area. So here I am on the quotes tab. Let me kind of show you how I got to this. So I'm going to go to the opportunities tab. I'm going to search for the opportunity I'm looking for. In this case, it's the Core's 5th floor renovation. So this opportunity is the one that I want to view, and I'm going to double click into it. We'll land on the opportunity info page. The one thing I'll point out here before we jump into our quote is that our SFN details from our designated quote are listed right here. So we can see that our walls that are 115K, millwork at 42, so on down the line for a total of 470. So when we go over to our quotes tab, we can see that we've got one quote here, and it's listed as our forecasted quote. And if for whatever reason we needed to undesignate that forecast, we can use this undesignate. You can see this flips over to no, and that will mean that our information will no longer flow through to this opportunity overview info page. So normally we do want to have one forecasted, so I'm going to go ahead and redesignate that. And let's say that the next thing we'll take a look at here is the duplicate quote. Let's say that the client came back and asked for a small change to one of to the design that's going to have a cost impact. So we're going to submit a new quote. One handy thing here is that you can duplicate this quote, so you can kind of keep a running record of what your quote was, and you could include in the description here, let's say, want to update millwork to client specs from 10/12, let's say it came in Friday. And we can make our update here on our line item. So let me just go ahead and update it. We did this one in the hidden lines. So I'm going to update this walls here. We'll say that the cost went up $1,500, and we're going to keep the same profit margin. So this is going to go to 116,500. We'll update that profit margin again to 25, and we'll click save here. And one thing we'll notice is that we get this warning showing that our hidden line items no longer tie out to our top. So what we can do is just use this copy totals to above button right here. We click that. All of these now add up to the totals from below, and we're good to go for this one. And we can click save, and we can click save here again. So you can see it was noted as a duplicate of quote 1. If you want to update that, you can certainly just change this over, get rid of that duplicate, and change it to, we'll just call it quote 2. So the other thing I want to show you is importing a quote. So if you are just starting a brand new project and you know that it's actually really similar to something else that you've done, maybe for the same client, like if you're working with a bank, maybe you're doing another branch that's going to overall have very similar specs, and you just want to be able to pull in all of that stuff. So you click this import button, and what we get here is a list of all of our either designated forecasted quotes or designated final quotes. The reason it's only pulling through those ones for you is because, you know, if you didn't have that that constraint on it, you might end up with a list of hundreds and hundreds of quotes, and it would be really tough to find it. So this is really just going to show you essentially your final version from any of your projects. So from this one, let's say I just want to pull in the one from the 4th floor renovation. So all I got to do is click here, and then I can click the select button, or I can just double click on this and it will pull in the quote for me. So this pulls in a copy of the quote. It renames it for the current project that I'm on, and everything in here is just going to be line item for line item the same as what I had on the other one, including all of our install estimates, etc. So let me flip back over here. So we've got duplicate, import, designate. All right, so let's start going through some more of the quote information. The one I'll focus on is this quote 2 that we duplicated. So I'm going to go ahead and designate this new one as the forecasted quote. And I'll go ahead and open it up again, and we'll take a look through some of the details here, starting with the client information. So the client information up here at the top, we've got a spot to input our client contact as well as a mobile number. And then there's also space to add a bill to address if you need to differentiate that between, say, just the address where you're actually doing the work. So if it needs to go to, say, their corporate headquarters. We also have the opportunity address. This is really going to be where the work is happening. And this client address, you can see it's got in parentheses here. It's pulled from the CRM. So whatever you have under your client in the CRM is going to pull through to here. So this is just some of your information about your client that you can attach to your quote. So the next section here is our quote overview. So you've got our quote name. So if you have multiple different versions and you want to keep track of it by a certain thing, you can do that here in the quote name. You can also add a proposal number. The created by is automatically populated by, and then the last modified is pretty useful here. If you're working on this in conjunction with one of your team members, and you know that so-and-so is going to update based on like the final quote we get from one of our suppliers, and you're not sure if they've updated it or not, and you can't remember exactly what the number was before. If you check out this last modified by and you see it was updated today, you might be like, oh, okay, well, it must have been updated for that last piece that they put in. You can, of course, add your description here, as well as include a sales rep or sales support. This will pull from your project team. This will be all of your internal employees, so you just double click someone to pull them in. And then there's also this section for the signature block. We'll kind of hit the documents last, but this is the way to include a signature block on one of your quote documents if you typically have a client actually sign the quote once it becomes your final. And another couple of tracking things, if you do have a bunch of quotes and if you're working across a bunch of projects, it's kind of hard to keep track of which one has been submitted to the client or which one has been approved by the client. So you've got these two sliders to allow you to keep track of those within the application. So the next section here is really what I consider to be the meat of the quote. This is your all of your quote details. It's going to have your line items, who the vendor is attached to it, what your cost is, what the margin is on it. All of that stuff is stored here. So I'm going to go ahead and open up this first line item. And for this one, this is for all of our DIRTT products, and this is still relatively new functionality that we added to allow you to assign a DIRTT product to one of these sub-items. So previously, you could only assign your DIRTT product for each quote line item. The way we've changed it is you can still do it that way, or you can also do it if you are trying to lump all of your DIRTT items into just one line item. So like if the client is just used to seeing a single line quote, you can do that and put all of your items as sub-items under here. So in this example, what we have is just one line item for our DIRTT stuff. And then here we've got our floors, our millwork, our power and data, and our walls. The way the system will recalculate these things is whenever you exit one of these cells, it will recalculate. So if I were to change the quantity to 2 here, that's going to update everything. It will update the cost here. It did not update our margin automatically because, I think, the situation comes up where maybe you have a small adjustment to your cost where, say, something's going to cost, I don't know, $20 more, and you want to capture that final cost here. But you don't necessarily want to pass along that change there because they've already reviewed the final quote, and it's all good. So it doesn't automatically update that, but if you update that gross margin percentage here, that will be what updates your sell price. The other thing you can do is you can add your tax here. So if it's taxable, you can click this taxable button, add your tax rate here. So we'll just say it's going to be 7.5% for the tax. And if you have an outside system that you're trying to match to, or if you have a unique tax situation where the first X number of dollars are taxable and then everything after that is at a different rate, you can also override this and just enter in manually a tax amount. So say it's going to be $42,000. You can just do that as well. Then it'll back into the overall percentage from there. So your sub-line items here, they're going to really work the same way as your regular line items. So all of this stuff just looks exactly the same. The taxable, all of that works the same as it does for your regular line item. But as I've mentioned, this DIRTT product here is still relatively new. So this is something that you can assign at this hidden line item level if you want to. And this will also flow through to your SFN totals on that opportunity overview page. So once I assign a DIRTT product here, we'll see that this is automatically going to change to not applicable and it's no longer editable. The reason is because we've got that DIRTT product down here in our hidden line items. So again, we've got that warning because these totals are no longer in sync. So I'm just going to copy the totals to above and go ahead and click Save on this line item. So we can build out all of our line items as needed. We can attach our vendors as appropriate as well. And let's say that we want to add one more product, and we're going to do this from the frequent products. So I'm going to click this button, and this is set up under the My Company page. So you can set up, say you have a vendor that you typically go to for your COM class, you can pull that in here. So, or you can set them up under the My Company, and then you can pull them into any quote. This will help save you a little bit of time because you don't have to type the description. You don't have to select the company again. Even if you have a very standard cost, you can input that here as well. For a lot of them, the cost is not necessarily going to be the same from quote to quote. So for a lot of people, they leave this part as zeros here, and that's totally fine too. It does still save you some time here to have that set up under the My Company page. And as you can see, you can also build out your hidden line items if you'd like to as well. At the end, we'll take a quick look at the My Company page on where you can set all of this stuff up. So a couple other buttons on here. You can also duplicate your quote line. So if you know that you need multiple of them, you can duplicate it. Just click save there. And you can see we've got 2 of them now. And then this other button here is to update the margin or tax. The driving reason behind why we added this was a partner brought to us the situation that they had been informed that for them to really be competitive, it was really going to come down to price for the client. And what they needed to do is they had to go in, they had to update the margin for each one of their line items. And, it just takes a long time to do that stuff compared to if they just have one way to do it where it would update all line items. So this is your way to be able to do that. So if we click on this, it'll give us the option, or it'll tell us what our current gross profit margin is. So let's say the new one, we're just going to lower it by half a percentage point. So we'll do it to 21.5. And it says, do we want to change the base? Yes, we do. Do we want to change our alternates? You've got that option here. So you can do both of them, or you can do just one. In this case, I'm just going to do the base. And then the same thing is true for the tax. So if you need to update all of your tax percentages for whatever reason, you can do that here as well. It is only going to affect taxes that are already marked as taxable. So what I mean by that is if it's not marked as taxable, this function will not add tax to it. So if it's not marked taxable, this won't add tax. So we'll change the base on that as well, and we'll click update. And what we'll see here is that every one of the line items margin percentage is now 21.5. And for our 2 lines down here, the ones that were marked taxable, they are at 7%. And then the last button here, if you ever have the need, you can also export your line items out to Excel. Moving along to the alternates here. Your alternates, the functionality is going to be very similar to what we were looking at for our regular line items in terms of updating them. So now that I've got this alternate open, this is for upsell DIRTT products. So within our lines, we've actually got one here to remove all the current DIRTT products. So it's going to be a negative value. And then our second line here is for the upsell DIRTT products. So this is going to include all of the new values, and what we have as the total is really just the incremental value of the alternates here. So right now we've got about a 500K quote. I'm just putting this over so you can see this 501,000 right there. And if we choose to include this in the bid, that when I click save is going to add this $41,000 to our overall quote, and we can see that updated to 542 from there. A couple more notes on the totals here. If your project is bonded and you need to add a bond fee on it, you can click that check mark and add the fee there. If for whatever reason you need to override the tax, like if there's a small rounding difference between something you're using outside and this, you can do that. And then you can also include square footage data, because we know that when you're working with DIRTT, most of the stuff is in terms of linear feet, but your competitors may be submitting it in square foot, and that's how maybe your client is used to receiving quotes. So you've got the option to put your square footage in here. It'll calculate your sell by square foot, and you can include that piece of information on your quote document as well. So we'll go and flag that to yes when we take a look at the documents. So this last section down at the bottom is for our install estimate, as well as all of the quote response terms, conditions, and exclusions. So we'll start with the install estimate here. So your install estimate can really be a powerful tool. As I've mentioned, that the reporting will automatically be generated once you start submitting status reports. So what you have built up here will flow through to your project and can be compared to automatically. So just starting at the top, we've got the complexity here. It's low or basic, moderate, or complex. I think really the big differentiation here is how much contingency do you need? Because if it's a very complex install, You might have to add a little bit of fluff to your numbers to make sure that you're not potentially you're just building in the area where the unexpected could happen. Then you can also capture the number of doors, your linear feet, and then as well as the number of people in each one of these roles, so the supervisors, techs, and laborers. And then, as I mentioned, there's a bunch of different installation activities that you can capture hours for each one of these roles. So it's pretty detailed. I think the more you put into it, the more you can get out of it in terms of analyzing your data later. If you really are just trying to put in, okay, here are the total number of hours, you could always use this other section to just capture your overall hours estimate. There is the detailed install estimate as well as the summary. So the detailed, really the big difference between it, if you flag that to on, is that you're going to have both your regular time and your overtime for each one of those roles. That's the difference between the two. So the next three sections here, I'll go and unbutton all of them, are your quote response, your terms and conditions, and your exclusions. So you can see in here, we've already got some language populated. This is pulling from the My Company section. At the end, I'll flip over to the My Company section so you can see where you can have all that information entered so that it will pre-populate in here. But once you get to an individual quote, what you're updating here is going to be unique to this quote. So what a lot of people like to do is just put a space so that you can update it for what's applicable here. The other thing that we've seen a lot of partners have success with when it comes to these sections is that you include as much information as might come up on a quote, and then if it doesn't apply, so if demountable walls don't apply to this, you can just delete it, and then you're good with it. It's a lot easier than trying to remember every little situation that may come up. And this will be included on your quote documents as well. So terms and conditions, exclusions, all of these really work the same way. One trick I do want to show you just about this text editor, so I didn't know about it for a while because these are relatively small to edit in, is you can use this maximize button here, and that'll make it be the full screen. So if you're really trying to do some intense editing of it, it might be easier to work when you have it full screen. So the next thing we'll take a look at is the quote documents here. I'd mentioned that we've got an area to include the signature block, so we've got that flagged to yes. So let's go and create a quote and see what it looks like. So up here, we've got our address that's pulling from the My Company page. We've got our logo that's also from the My Company section. And we've got our quote information here. So this is our quote name, the date it was created. And then the next section here is all pulling from our quote response. After our quote response, we have all of our line items from our quote. So we can see that, again, this DIRTT section here, the one where we had all of our hidden line items, all it's pulling through is just that one summary line. Then the next section here is we've got our alternate details. And on this, this again is just doing the same thing. So our hidden line items are not pulling through to this. And one other thing I want to show you about the alternates is that we've got the ability to either include the line item detail or not. By default, it'll be turned on to yes. But if we click this over to no, I'll just create the document again. What we'll see is the alternate will just show us the summary total. So we can see upsell DIRTT products, and this is the incremental cost of those. And is it included in the final bid? Yes, it is, and that's how we know it's included in this total there. That square footage that we input is pulling through right here. And then after our line items, we've got all of our terms and conditions, and then our exclusions, and then down here is the signature block. So the other quote document here is we've got a summary quote. It's going to ask us with or without alternates. We'll do it with the alternates here. The big difference between the summary quote and the regular quote is just what it has for the terms of the line item. So this is only going to show you just your subtotal, your total, or your tax, and your total. whereas your regular quote document will have each of those line items. So depending on what client you're working with, what they like to see, or how you like presenting it as a company, may dictate which one of those documents is right for what situation. So with the alternates, again, it's just the same thing. We don't have the line item detail here, and that's controlled by that slider back on that quote new edit page. You can also send an email directly out of Kinetic. So if we do that, we can add a client contact to it. And then here's the quote. When this email is sent, it's going to include a PDF attachment of your regular quote. So whatever you have flagged on here, so if it includes line item detail, if it includes your signature block, that'll be what pulls through to that PDF. And the last one here is the internal pricing document. This one is unique from the other ones in that it also has your cost. This is going to be the only one that has your cost, and it's also going to be the only one that has any internal notes on it. So I'll go ahead and open this up. We can see it's got all of that contact information as well from internally. It's going to have your hidden items on it. It's going to have all of your costs. So if you need to provide this to the accounting side of the house, they can really have all the detail that they are going to need to capture from there. One thing I did not touch on, just want to show you real quick. I'd mentioned internal notes. This internal notes section here, if you have a weird situation where maybe you didn't add your normal margin on it, maybe it was a little bit lower for whatever reason, you can note that here. And again, this is going to be something that would only generate on an internal document. It'll never be on that client-facing document. So let's see what we've covered on our agenda. So talk about duplicating, importing, designating it, look at the quote information, edit line items, add frequent products, update margin or tax, the install estimate, the documents. So the last part here would be the My Company section. So I'll go ahead and click Save on this quote. And the My Company section, as a reminder, is this waffle icon. And so the part we're going to take a look at is going to be for the contract information. So we've got our quote standard response. So all of this will automatically pull through to any new quote you create. And you can edit here. Of course, it won't automatically update like any existing quotes, so don't worry about that. It's just for new quotes. So once you, I guess, are good with what you want to put on here as a company, you can update this. I think it's kind of easy to forget about this stuff because once you do it, it's more of a set it and forget it sort of activity. I think in practice, most people don't come back to edit this super often. But did someone have a question on the phone? The other thing I wanted to point out while we're talking about quotes in the My Company section here is the project fees. So for quote frequent products, when we pulled up that list and pulled in this COM class, this is where you can go to edit it, and you can create new items. If an item no longer applies, you can also delete it from this list just so things don't get too muddled up. I'll just open one of these as well. Hopefully this looks familiar. This really is the same layout as a quote line item. So when you pull these in, it'll pull it in just as you see it here. All of that stuff is just, it's got the same exact fields. So that's it for the prepared portion and reviewing quotes as well as the workflows. So I will hang on for any questions that you all would like to go through, and I'll stop the recording here.